Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. Today we're going to be recapping the current Timeless meta because the meta is quite stable right now, and we just had a tournament. We're recording this right as Aether Drift Spoilers preview, so this is before that set is going to be released, and we just got Chrome Mox spoiled, which is going to have a big effect on the format. So let's go ahead and take a snapshot now before everything gets a little disjointed and things start moving around. Because I do think the meta is pretty stable and agreed upon. I also was able to find agreed upon deck lists for all of these decks that I consider to be in the meta from tier 1 to tier 4, and sideboard guides or deck guides for most of them. Not all of them have deck guides, but about half of them do have well-written and updated deck guides. So I'm going to put all of those in the description, and something else I did recently is we made a new channel in Discord. That's mostly just like a reference channel where I put the same information. I'm just going to keep updated deck lists and guides for the meta. So if you're not in the Discord already, that's another reason to join it so that you can have access to that reference information really easily. This video, I'm not going to show anything on screen, so you can just listen in podcast mode or just go to that comment in Discord to get all of the information. What I am going to go over for the rest of the video is just my thoughts on each of these decks, where they sit in the meta, and why I put them in the particular tier that they are. We're going to just go left to right, up, top to bottom on this. First is Black White Belcher. There are 3 decks in meta-defining tier as the best decks in the format. If you ask most people, they would say Mardu Energy and Show and Tell are the 2 defining decks of the format, right? They're the 2 decks that really check other decks' viabilities, and if you look at the most played decks on ladder, it's those 2 plus Psychic Frog variants as the most played decks by a lot. And Psychic Frog variance is boosted by fun. If you are playing the format to win, you're going to play Mardu or Show and Tell. So it's really interesting that Black White Belcher is in tier 1. And I remember even when the deck was first like really finalized and put together in a good form, and people started putting up results with it, I was one of the people who immediately put it in the top tier alongside Mardu and Show and Tell months ago. And since then, the deck has really declined in popularity. I don't think it ever like went down in terms of viability in the meta. It's just that people really weren't playing it. And a lot of people disagreed with me. Like I remember Tyrant was doing his tier list and he asked me my opinion. I'm like, dude, you got to put this in the top tier. This is probably the best deck in the format if you are trying to win and you are good at it. But I think it ended up sliding down that tier list. And in most people's tier list, it slid down. But we just had the tournament this weekend. This deck got first place. Confirmed what I thought. This deck is nasty. It is mean if you know what you're doing. The play patterns are incredibly degenerate. There is very little that other decks in this format can do to properly contain it, and it's going to get Chrome Mox. So I think this is probably going to be the best deck in the format after Aether Drift. This is the #1 deck that's going to benefit from Chrome Mox entering the format. I'm scared. It is degenerate stuff. So I was having a discussion in Discord today because I was trying to just put together information before I got this video. I was like gathering the deck lists for everything. I was talking to Tommy about Belcher because I knew I wanted to put it in tier 1. I didn't tell anyone. That's why I was talking about it, but I needed everybody's opinion on this deck. And I'm like, all right, Tommy, you just won the tournament with this deck. Why is no one playing it? And we concluded that, well, one, it's not like a really appealing, interesting, intellectual deck like Psychic Frog decks are, right? People don't feel smart playing it. People feel like they're playing a slot machine. And at first glance, that's what it seems like it is. It seems like it's just a mulligan simulator. But the lines aren't always obvious and they're not always easy. It's a deck where you mulligan to Necro and then you draw X cards. What should X be? And then you have to figure out what you do with your Necro turn. That by itself makes the deck somewhat high skill ceiling. Maybe not as high skill ceiling as some other combo decks, but like it's not just a slot machine deck. There is a lot of difficulty piloting it, and even someone like me, if I were to try to pick up the deck right now, I would really have to think a lot. Like I would have to invest some time into reading everything that other people have wrote about this deck and learn about it, because there are no good video guides on it right now. And I think that's what I'm going to do. We were talking to Discord and I said, you know what? I'm just going to like main this deck for the next week, maybe 2 in ranked. I'm going to learn the ins and outs. I'm going to just play a bunch with Tommy even. I'll have him coach me. And I'll see if I can get insanely good at this deck and make a video on it. Because I do think the deck is this good. I personally don't know how to play it. I don't have the skill to play it at that really high level. So I'm going to develop the skills, see if I can, and make a video guide and see if that increases the deck's popularity. Because I really think it's only going to get better after Aether Drift, unless something really surprising happens. Like we get, I don't know, Force of Negation or Force of Will and the special guests. Currently, they only spoiled 3 of the special guests. 2 were absolute duds for the format. What was it? Chandra's Ignitions and Lord of the Undead? Is that what it's called? The Zombie Lord. I mean, for the zombie chads out there, go off. But really, Chromox is just going to boost decks like this. So I'm very interested in this deck's development. I might drop a video in a week or two once I learn how to play it. Because yeah, with this YouTube channel, I don't care about uploading frequently at this point. I just want to upload quality content. And I think the highest quality thing I could do is really good gameplay on this deck that nobody has uploaded really good gameplay on. All right, Mardu Energy. I don't think I need to elaborate on this. This has been at the top of the meta forever. In the tournament, it was in the top 8. I think it was 3rd place. The tournament before that, 3 out of the top 8 was Energy. The metagame challenge, dominant, at least in terms of like my self-collected data, dominant, right? So I still think it's tier 1. I still think it's at the top. That's it. If it looked less popular at the tournament, I think only like 2 people registered it, just because people are getting a little bored of it. And the same thing with Show and Tell. Show and Tell is very common on ladder. It also was very common at the last metagame challenge. It was the number 2 deck after Mardu Energy in terms of popularity from my data, and those 2 decks were leagues above anything else. Even when you put all the Psychic Frog Cope together into one pile, both of those still like eclipsed it in terms of metagame challenge popularity. But the thing is, at this most recent tournament, no one registered it, which is really strange. Probably just because people are bored of the deck, and a lot of the people who I know of that are good show and tell pilots in Discord, they registered the new chorus control list instead, and they tried to take down the tournament with that. So it's just, chance that nobody registered it for this event. I still think it is a tier 1 deck because it puts a lot of pressure on the meta. The fact that somebody can just win the game for 3 mana in blue does provide a lot of pressure on the meta and pressure on deck building. Every deck needs to be geared to beat this deck because it is pretty common on ladder. It's not incredibly common, but you don't want to lose just because you can't interact with show and tell, right? Everybody built their sideboards thinking of show and tell. Even if nobody played it at the last tournament, I still think it deserves this tier 1 slot all the way at the top. In tier 2, we have decks that I don't consider to be meta defining, but they are really strong picks. By the way, when I'm looking at this in the scope of either I'm going to play in the next Timeless tournament or I want to get a very high rank on ladder. Talking about like, I want to hit top 100, top 10. Oh yeah, and another point for Black White Belcher, part of why I evaluated it so high is because a lot of the guys in Discord who are good at these sorts of decks got obscenely high ranks with it. I think Tommy, who won the tournament, got rank 5 with it. Greaseball finished in the single-digit ranks. Was it rank 2 or 3? Something stupidly high. You almost never see somebody finish a season playing exclusively Timeless and get top 10 overall on Arena. All those constructed leaderboards are together. It's not Timeless only. If somebody's top 10 playing Timeless, they're top 10 on all of Arena constructed, which is insane, right? You almost never see somebody finish top 10. Like, I finished rank 9 with Energy once when I grinded the hell out of it when it was new and really busted. And I know a single-digit number of people that have ever finished top 10 playing Timeless, and then one of them was with this deck. That's why I think so highly of it. Anyway, onto Blue Belcher, because they're very similar decks. Blue Belcher is the next best Belcher variant in the format. I think this is also going to get a huge boost from Chrome Mox entering the meta. And if I think the meta gets really degenerate, like my prediction, if the meta gets super degen, this deck might go up a lot. Why? Because it gets to play Commandeer. Plays 4 copies of them in the main deck, which is a great way to win degenerate mirrors. Just steal your opponent's win condition off the stack. So Blue Belcher has a very favored matchup against Black White Belcher, I think. Again, not an expert, didn't shoot the messenger, but I think in theory, it has really cool tools to fight back in Commandeer and Mana Drain, right? So there's a lot of stock in this deck. I put a lot of stock in it, even though it's not common on ladder. Because Tommy, the same guy who won this tournament with Black White Belcher, won the previous tournament. So the same guy has won the last 2 Timeless tournaments in a row with Blue Belcher and Black White Belcher. Tommy himself says this deck is stronger, and I agree with him. Yeah, it's wild. And they were decently sized tournaments, too. It's not like only 4 people signed up for the tournament. I think about 20 signed up for each tournament. A bit over 20 for each of them, right? I think it was like 22, 23 each. And Belcher on top both times. All right, up next, Boros Energy. So this specific Boros Energy, again, like check the comment where I have all the deck list pins. This is the Fleege build. It has Fleege, One Ring, Blood Moon, Giganta Companion. You can vary it up. Some people drop the Giganta Companion and play Skyclave Apparition. Some people play less copies of Fleege. Some people play less copies of the Ring. Some people don't play the Blood Moon. Whatever, potato, potato. We're talking about roughly the same deck. This is the value-oriented energy deck list. Here's the idea and deck building philosophy behind this deck. You're losing a lot of stock compared to Mardu in some matchups. Mardu is built by me to take down unfair decks. It is a very fast deck that packs black interaction. It is ripping its opponent's hand apart and putting pressure on the board and doing it at a ridiculously fast pace. It will not be able to outgrind Boros Energy. Boros Energy is a deck that can play Fleege as a removal spell that has a body, giving them card advantage. It can play the One Ring, giving them a ridiculous amount of card advantage and stalling power against other mid-range decks. Boros Energy, by design, is a sort of greedy deck that is designed to take down all of the creature decks in the format, including Mardu Energy. So we'll have to see how the meta develops again with Chrome Mox. Because Boros Energy can leverage it a little bit better than Mardu, because you can ramp into the ring and then use the ring to recoup the card advantage off of your Chrome Mox, which is really cool. But in the current meta right now, I think it is very well positioned. If you are encountering a lot of creature decks on ladder, this is a great deck to grind ladder with. If you're going to a tournament, I don't think it's as good of a choice because you're going to have a difficult time against a lot of combo decks, but I think it's a great ladder deck right now. It's a solid tier 2 deck. I would not be playing it over Mardu, but in a future meta shift, such as the meta shift that's going to happen with Aether Drift, it might actually eclipse Mardu, depending on where the meta settles, right? Because it's getting a boost in the sense that Mardu is going to get worse and it's going to get to use Chrome Mox. However, creature decks are going to leave the meta because more combo decks are going to come in. So don't know if this one's going to go up or down in the near future. After this, we have Chorus Control. Chorus Control is currently building Grixis, and they are using Jace Valky as their win condition. I'm going to clarify, this is not a Jace Valky deck. This is just a control deck that uses like 2 copies of Valky as their win condition. Because timeless games can go quite long. If the control deck gets the game locked down, a timeless deck has the ability to talk deck some bullshit and get out of it. So the Chorus Control list plays the Jaces and the Valkyes as a way to tutor for a card that they can use to win the game on the spot. They tutor for the combo, they put it in their hand, and then they win the game on the spot. And the reason you do that is because it's Luris compatible, right? Because your deck is going to play like Bauble, Tameo, Bowmasters, Psychic Frog, whatever. The current builds aren't necessarily playing all of those creatures, but they are still relying on Lurrus as a source of free card advantage. So that's all. Don't view it as like a Jace Valky deck. View it as a lockdown control deck. The Chorus package is proven very, very, very strong time and time again in Timeless. For example, right now we're seeing an uptick in midrange decks and a bunch of big creatures with like 5 and 6 toughness. This deck has no problem like hitting 6 intensity on the Chorus spell and killing those for 1 mana. Like it's a really good pick in the meta right now. The current version is Grixis. I will have a link to the current deck list, but there are a lot of ways to build Chorus Control. I've seen Jeskai builds, I've seen 80 card Yorion builds, I've seen like Mistman style builds with the only win condition being Bowmasters. I'm not too fond of that kind of control deck. I think you're setting yourself up to lose, which is why I really like the Jace Valky version, because instead of like having to actually control the board for like 10 turns straight to win with your Bowmasters beatdown, you can win the game on the spot and prevent your opponent from doing something bullshit. I know the really, really smart blue mages will like argue with me and say it's not necessary, but at least in my opinion, if you want to grind ladder and you want to win games in a reasonable time frame, I think Chorus Control is the way to go right now if you want to play Control. Dimir Tempo, most popular deck on ladder by a wide margin, and what Dimir Tempo means is like very wide. And I think down in the section where I linked all the deck lists, I split it into like the Lurrus versions and the Oculus versions. I think on this tier list, I'm just putting them both in tier 2 because they're roughly analogous. The same kind of people play both. There is a lot of variations in the builds here. The deck is pretty strong. It is not the #1 deck in the format, but it is a very viable choice. It's a very popular choice on ladder. It has put a lot of pressure on the meta just because it's so popular, right? Every deck needs to be able to kill a Psychic Frog, and every deck needs to be able to win through mana drain. Every deck needs to be able to deal with a flipped Tameo, or every creature deck needs to be able to deal with a flipped Tameo. Flipped Tameo is less threatening for control decks. It's very threatening for something like Mardu Energy. So just because of this deck's meta share, it's up here in tier 2. If people stop playing it on ladder for some reason, I would be tempted to drop it down to tier 3. I would be tempted. But the deck is definitely good enough to grind to Mythic. And it's very popular for a reason. It's still pretty good in the meta. I wouldn't call it great, but I would call it pretty good. Up next are the decks that I think are playable. I think that if you are an expert who really dedicates their time to learning the ins and outs of these decks, you can get high Mythic with them. Like, for example, I was playing Gruul Gift at the beginning of this season, and playing a mix of Mardu Energy and Gruul Gift, I would switch between them when I got bored. I hit rank 5 earlier in the season. And that's early season rank 5, as opposed to late season rank 5, like I was talking about before with Black White Belcher. Different animals hitting the high rank early and late versus late in the season, but this goes to show that this can be a part of a high ranked run. This tier could be part of a high ranked run. So up here is Jetstorm. Down in tier 3, and I really wasn't sure where to tier this, because Jetstorm, in my opinion, is a very powerful deck, and I still think it's a pretty good deck if you really know it well. However, no one's really playing it. Experts aren't around, and I've seen a downtick in popularity. One of the problems with the current builds of Jetstorm, because Jetstorm did theoretically get better by starting to play Priest of Gix and Sister Supplier. Part of the problems with that is the optimal lines that you could take with this deck in paper are not possible on Arena. You cannot just sit there and loop 2 creatures, scrying 1 each time one of them dies to stack your library. It is something you can do in paper, but you cannot really do in a reasonable clock time on Arena. So you're sometimes forced to take suboptimal lines. You really need to know the deck in and out to understand how to win and when to win with this deck. I still think it is very powerful. I still think that if you took the time, and it's going to take you dozens of hours, if you spent those dozens of hours learning the ins and outs of Jetstorm, I still think you can get high Mythic with it. And the good combo players have done so in the past. It's just, recently it's fallen out of favor. I was looking at recent tournament results. I think only one person registered it to the last 3 tournaments, and they only got 1 win. So tournament results can't save us here. I think the deck's good, but it's going to be down in tier 3 until I see other people prove that it belongs in tier 2. Esper Rescam, this is a fine mid-range deck in the format. This is the version that's playing Psychic Frog plus the Scam Elementals plus Ephemerate plus Reanimate. Really nice mid-range deck. It could do some degenerate stuff. It is fine. I don't think it is great in the meta, but I also just don't think it's a bad choice. If you understand the deck really well, it is a good mid-range deck to go ahead and attack the format with. It's nice because it leans in all those 3 different colors, so it gets to interact with its opponents very, very well. However, you don't play a really fast clock in this deck like some other mid-range decks do. You don't do things that are that degenerate. I know scamming an elemental is pretty degenerate, but if you grief scam and rip your opponent's hand apart, you only have a 3/2 in play. So it's not a ridiculously fast clock compared to disgusting things that Mardu or the new Bailmerk deck that we're going to talk about are capable of doing, right? So you are playing a slower mid-range deck that's better at interacting. If you like that style of gameplay, this is the deck for you. I don't think it's tier 1 or tier 2, but I think it's a fine deck that you could play. Up next is Black Midrange, built around the One Ring. Black Midrange has been splashing various colors as people try and figure out how to do it. Recently, I tried a version that splash blue for Psychic Frog, and it felt really, really good. I had a lot of success with it on ladder, and I think other people will have success with it. Somebody brought the Splash Blue Psychic Frog version to the last tournament, and they got top 8 with it. So very happy to see that. I think this is a solid mid-range choice. This is a Dark Ritual Abuse deck, and it could get better with Grown Mox. This is a deck that really relies on the One Ring to stabilize it in games and pull ahead on card advantage compared to other decks. I like it. It's a deck that I like playing, and it's one that I recommend if you do enjoy the style of gameplay. Up next is Jund Breach. This is the evolution of the original Rakdos Underworld Breach from the early days of Tierlist. The deck is still kicking. It is now in Jund colors to play Malevolent Rumble. I think it is really strong. I think you do need to be really practiced on the combo to play it. I'm going to repeat that same point a lot for decks in this tier. I think that if you are practiced and it is your style of deck, you will succeed with the deck. But I think if you're a random dude who doesn't necessarily play combo decks and you try to pick up one of the ones in tier 3, you're just going to end up getting frustrated and losing a lot of games to not understanding how to navigate your lines correctly. Jund Breach is really sweet in my opinion because you do have that somewhat fair beatdown plan because you play Dragon's Rage Channeler, you play Deathrite Shaman, so your creatures are things that need to be dealt with on their own, and then you have the ability to absolutely win out of nowhere. The problem is that this deck does die to both Graveyard Hate and Show and Tell Hate, right? if you put a Deafening Silence down, which is your show and tell sideboard card, they can't do their thing, right? Disruptor Flute on Dark Ritual, they can't combo. Put down any Graveyard Hate, they're going to have a lot of difficulty comboing. Of course, they're a green deck that can remove a lot of these permanents, but you're making them jump through hoops to do their thing, and if you're playing something like Mardu Energy, dropping one of these cards will give you enough time to kill them. Up next, Tainted Pact. I think that deck is pretty good right now. I've seen some builds of Tainted Pact that have had success lately. I think someone brought it to the tournament and got good results with it. I think it's solid if you are a control mage. I think it's the next best control strategy in the format after Chorus Control. Generally, Tainted Pact does build control in this format. You pretty much just load up all the blue-black control spells and you get there. So if that's the kind of gameplay that you really, really enjoy, go for it. Up next is Gruul Gift. This is a deck that I love personally. I got a recent video on it. I think this deck is so much fun. Graveyard Hate is a little bit underplayed in the format right now, so you can get away with playing this deck. Even if you do get hit by Graveyard Hate, this deck has 5 other ways to win. You could just show and tell your things in. You could hard cast some stuff. You can copy your targets with Fable the Mirror Breaker when games go long. That's what I love about this deck, right? Because it relies on Fable the Mirror Breaker and the One Ring, which will just give you a crap ton of card advantage and win games through sideboard pieces for you. So I think this deck is pretty strong if you love that kind of combo. And I just worry it's going to fall behind other things in the deck. There are faster, more degenerate decks in the format. This is one that's not necessarily going to benefit from Chrome Mox speeding it up, unfortunately, just because you really need to get cards in your graveyard and get Delirium. You don't want to 2-for-1 yourself out of your hand too much, though we're already playing Ugin's Lab. So maybe I could screw with the deck list enough to get it to a point where it's good. But I think this is a good pick in the meta right now. I don't think it's great, but you can have fun with it, like I did. Next is Dimir Control, and when I say Dimir Control, I know we've already gone over 2 other control lists, Tainted Pact and the Chorus Control. I'm talking about like Mistman Control here, and I was like debating putting this like here or here, and like just to avoid like the Blue Mage cope, we're gonna put it in tier 3. But no, if you're not a Blue Mage, it's like down here. You can build control lists like this, and players like Mistman show time and time again you can still win games like this and get very high mythic. I'm not a control-brained kind of guy. If you show me a list like this, I'm never going to play it, man. I think that's signing up to lose, but the really smart control players of the format have shown that you can eke out wins on ladder. I will warn you before you pick this up that you're going to spend 50 minutes per game trying to win games, right? It's going to go long. It's going to take forever. Your opponents are going to top deck from under your control, and you're going to get frustrated. And it's going to be mentally taxing. So it's not a quick and easy deck to climb with at all. But yeah, if you're a control mage like Mistman, you're still going to find a way to do it. So, go off, King. Lastly, is Bilmerk Midrange. This is a new one. I wasn't sure if I should put it in tier 4 just out of it being so new. But I think this is a good midrange deck that is on par with the Mono Black and the Rescam decks in Esper. I think it's very similar to these 2 in power level, which is why I put it in tier 3. I think if the deck really gets refined, it could even jump to tier 2. We'll have to see. This deck is rapidly evolving. It is a new deck that, okay, I'll take credit. I thought of 2 weeks ago. I was going to say I thought of it, and I stopped myself. I'm like, that's way too cocky. I can't say I thought of the deck, but yeah. It was originally I had the idea to visit a Philia deck in Black-White with Yorion. Had a lot of initial success with it, and then a lot of other people in Discord jumped on. It was mostly Dem who took the list and refined it and made a Birthing Ritual version, which seems to be the current best version of the list. It is Abzin, so you're just splashing green for the Birthing Ritual, Deathrite Shaman, and like Once Upon a Time, I think. Other than that, it's straight Black-White. It is very interesting, very strong, and one new thing to come out of the tournament, we'll have to see, is somebody sort of hybridized these 2 lists. They didn't play Belcher, but they played the Sorin combo in the Balemark deck. And they got top 4 with it, I think. Very interesting, right? They got 4th place with the deck. So I'm very interested to see where it goes. I'm not going to put that as a separate deck because it's like brand new. Like the person, Long Sleeves, who ran it in the tournament, they said they literally thought of it the day before the tournament and they threw it together because they also were enjoying this Balemark midrange and they're like, wait, I could make it super degen if we put the Sorin combo into it. And currently in Discord, a bunch of us are innovating on it and seeing if we could find it. So depending on what happens, we could see a Balemark deck creep up, depending on how good that Sorin version is. I think that Sorin version could really benefit from Chrome Mox as well. So like, watch out. That might be climbing up the tier list. But I think the Birthing Ritual deck is also really solid if you just want to play mid-range. And there's also other builds. There is a 60 card non-Birthing Ritual build, which is fine. I played it a bunch. I think it's almost as good, but the Birthing Ritual list is still being worked on, especially if you consider sideboard cards. Having access to green is really sweet. And there was a Yorion version that I had for a while, and I played the Yorion version. We agreed 60 is better because you have some really busted cards and some busted interactions in the deck, and you don't want to dilute the deck by stretching it out to 80, even though there are a lot of playable cards. Like, for example, in the current mid-range builds, really good cards that used to be great in the deck, such as like Guide Pride. Actually, Guide Pride is in some of the builds. It's not in the Sorin build, but it is in the Birthing Ritual build. Some of the builds are cutting Deathrite Shaman. All of the builds are cutting Recruiter of the Guard, even though it was like the best card in the deck when I first put together the Yorion version. A lot of people are cutting their Solitudes. A lot of people are moving the Skyclave Apparitions to the sideboards. People are playing less Peddlers. Like we really have to squeeze the deck down to 60. There's so many playable cards that almost make the cut. Chthonian Nightmare as well. Dem was playing like 4 copies of that for the longest time because it's really strong. So we're still figuring out the list. There's definitely a lot of improvements to be made. Oh yeah, no Reanimate in the current versions of the list. Right. Reanimate was like the #1 reason I put the list together. And like the Birthing Ritual version just doesn't play it. Just because it doesn't fit, which is insane. The Sorin version still does play it. So lots of innovation to be had. Like there are so many ways you could build this deck. Join the Discord and contribute is what I gotta say to you. All right, Delirium Aggro. I think that this deck is actually still okay, but no one has really innovated on it in a while. The best version of this list was Jund. It was invented by Greaseball and Riley, and one of them, or maybe both of them, I can't remember which, got a really high rank early in the season. I think it was Riley that got like top 5 early in the season with it or something like that. So the deck has potential. That was 3, 4, 5 months ago, maybe. Can't quite remember, but the meta hasn't changed too much from then. If you want to sleeve up the Jund Delirium, please go for it. Please prove that this deck still has a place in the sun. Has not much changed. There's no sideboard hate really bringing it down. It's just underplayed, and it never like saw widespread adoption. I think I made one video of it, but then like I really didn't see it on ladder from there. So please feel free to like prove this deck and prove that it deserves to go up a tier. I'd be super happy to see it. And lastly, we have Mono White Control. This is a fun deck. I think it's a very fringe control list that you can play. It had a top 8 at a tournament. I think it is fun, interesting. It can beat the crap out of Mardu Energy, because Mardu Energy absolutely cannot handle you just bouncing your own One Ring. If you resolve the One Ring against Energy, you just win with Mono White Control. It's so funny, right? But the deck is limited in quite a few ways, right? Quite a few things holding the deck back. It will struggle against a lot of other decks in the format. It does have a lot of ways to interact with your opponent. It can play the land destruction game, but it's not a great deck right now. It's fringe if you want to have fun, but I would not recommend this deck if you wanted to grind to high mythic right now. I was even thinking of taking it out of the meta, but dude, this deck is too cool to be removed. All right, here's your out of meta decks. We're going to go over them really quick, why I think they're out of the meta. Affinity, nobody ever found a good build. Amalia, I don't think was ever great, but I'm like a Luris Coper, and I like to insist that creature combo is playable, so I think at some point I had this on the tier list. By the way, all these are here because they were on previous iterations of my tier list. So this is my personal cope. I took my cope off the tier list. Beans was very, very, very popular when Modern Horizons 3 first dropped. People thought it was going to be a tier 1 deck, and before people really solved the meta, by the way, the meta is still very unsolved in my opinion, but it's settled now. Before the meta settled, Beans could definitely beat things up, but the current decks are just way too streamlined for Beans to ever beat. So I don't recommend Beans. If somebody could figure out a good Beans deck list, I'd be super interested in it. So feel free to go in Discord and talk to me about it, but just keep in mind, winning 3 games in Plat doesn't constitute a good deck list. Like I want to see a sample size of dozens of games. I want to see high mythic. I want to see a tournament result. It's not me being a toxic gatekeeper. It's just very possible that you can overestimate your own decks. So you got to show up large results over a long sample size. In fact, this Bilmerk deck here is a good example. So I thought that I was going to smash it at the tournament with this Bilmerk deck because I had like a 75 to 80 win rate on ladder with the deck, and I'm not exaggerating that one. Like the win rate was through the roof. I showed up at the tournament and I went 0-3 drop. And that's just ladder. It's easy to beat up poor players on ladder. because when you're really high mythic, it doesn't always match you against high mythic players. There's just not enough people in the queue, so oftentimes I get matched against random players, and I could beat them 70-80% of the time playing almost any deck on this list, right, guys? So I convinced myself that the mid-range deck was a lot better than it actually was. And that's my fault. I fell for the fallacy. And then what happened? Round one of the tournament, I get matched against a good player on chorus control, and I get my ass handed to me. I mean, it was a really close game, but it was the same story. I played chorus control, I played Tainted Pact control, and I played Mardu Energy, and I got beaten all 3 times because I played against 3 good players, and instead of 3 ladder players. So please be careful with overestimating a deck just because you had a little good run with it, especially if your sample size is small. But if you do get like that 80 win rate in Mythic, please come to me so that we can get other people trying the deck. This deck did shake out to be good because, you know, obviously there were multiple people trying it, multiple people put up like that 80 win rate in Mythic. When people saw I went 0-3 drop in the tournament, they said, oh shit, this deck sucks. But then 2 other people who weren't like the main people grinding it in Mythic took variations of it and went to top 8 with it. We had the regular version hit top 8 and the Soren version hit top 4. So maybe I just had bad luck. But I definitely thought the deck was a lot better in my head than it actually was. I really thought I was going to smash it at the tournament. I was disappointed in myself that I went 0-3. Anyway, Jeskai Breach. This deck is just a worse version of the other Breach, Jund Breach. There it is. But there are interesting ways to build Jeskai Breach. This is built with Mox Amber generally, and like the blue legends, sometimes Ragavan as well. It could be built with Tome Scour as well, but nobody figured out a good build for that. Jeskai Control is a deck that is like theoretically tier 4, maybe even tier 3, but nobody plays it. There's no agreed upon list. I think there is a decent Jeskai Control list out there. I think you can play Jeskai Control decently. There's also the Jeskai Control adjacent, like Stifle Knot, quote unquote Stifle Knot build, where you main deck Torpor Orb, and you also play Null Drifter, you play Flage. I've seen that deck before. I think it's okay. I think it would probably be fringe tier if more people started playing it and we could get an agreed upon deck list. Boomer Jund is out of the meta, sadly. Like, it breaks my heart. I know. On a green ramp, this had like a flash in the pan where you could play like Flare of Cultivation shortly after MH3 came out, but this never became anything. Nadu was never, ever an actual deck in Timeless, but it's on this tier list, and I would put it in F tier every time because people always ask me about it, because like this, you know, the card is infamous. It got banned in Modern, like perma-banned in Modern. Man, Nadu Summer sucked, right? And it's very playable in Legacy, so people like always try to put together a Modern Nadu list and send it to me. It actually hasn't happened for the last couple months, but I remember around the Modern ban, so like the month before it and the month or two after it, like everybody and their mother was like trying to break the format with Nadu, and the annoying part is that it wasn't like good players who were trying to do this. It was just like random people who would win 3 games in plat and then come to me and say they broke the format. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, I tried too. Like, I tried to put a list together, and I'm like, there's no way, right? We just need like a 0 mana activated artifact and a good way to tutor for it, which is what Modern had. Modern had Shuko and Urza Saga. We get those 2 things, Nadu would be tier 1, absolutely. If we get one of those things, like if we get like the Shuko with no way to tutor for it, then Nadu would be okay, probably tier 2, tier 3. The other issue with Nadu on Arena is that you can't do the paper loops. In paper, you can do the infinite loops and win the game. On Arena, too many clicks. You're going to have to think of an alternate win condition. And in my opinion, in Timeless, that throws the deck out the window. Because really all the deck is going to do, if you can't go infinite, is make like a bunch of Springheart Nantugos. And like that doesn't win the game, because you're going to pass the turn and your opponent's going to be like, okay, 3 mana, I cast Show and Tell. What are you doing? Rant over. I wish we get Shuko, man. I would totally try to put the deck together if we got Shuko. I just don't think it would get there, even with the busted combo card. By the way, it doesn't have to be Shuko in particular. Anything that has equipped 0 or a 0 that targets will work. So if we get that card, I will put the deck together and we'll see. But I still don't think it'll be good even with that card. It would be okay. It would need some other way to win. Like in Legacy, the old Cephalid breakfast decks, I think they milled you out to win. If that came to Timeless, then the deck would be good. So like the deck needs the 0 and it needs a way to win. If you can get those 2 things, the deck will be good. Okay. Necrostorm. This is the old Necropotence-based Storm deck, where you play Weather the Storm, gain life, and then eventually cast Tendrils of Agony. The old Spallet classic that he hit rank 1 with. I have not seen anyone play this deck in 6 months, so it's down here. It was great, though. It was the rank 1 deck. Buried Alive Phoenix ended up never being good, unfortunately. It's really degenerate and good in BO1. If you want to jam some BO1, go for it. By the way, this is for BO3. Crap, I forgot to specify that at the start of the video. People who watch me know. You know, you know. All right, prime time. It was good before MH3. Sucks after. Give us Amulet, and we can try again. Amulet and Bounce Lands. Man, some of these decks are so far off, right? Like you think, oh, if only we get the good card, and then you realize you need another card to back up the good card. Rakdos Burn does not quite get there, even with Bolt Weave, unfortunately. Which sucks because it like used to be a decent entry into the format, but no, not anymore. Even in the Lightning Bolt format, even with Bolt Wave, I think I just called it Bolt Weave, does not get there. Rakdos Scam ended up sucking. Like, people coped because, it, again, like in Adu, it was a scourge in Modern for a while, so people would force it in Timeless. And at points in the past, I would probably call it Tier 3, right? Because so many people played it. Same reason why Psychic Frog is so high and almost Tier 1, in my opinion, just because so many people play it. But people gave up. As they should. There's no all-in Reanimator format deck in the format right now. Not a good one. You could play it in BO1, but don't play it in BO3. Samwise combo? More cope adjacent to Amalia. Nope, there's no Luris creature combo deck in the format, even though like I tried forcing it really hard after MH3. There's just no such thing. Shadow Stack, this is like the Adam Goodman special. I maybe could put this in Fringe tier. It's a fine combo deck. I think somebody ran it at the metagame challenge and succeeded with it. Like, if you know the deck really well, you could consider this Fringe tier. I actually don't consider it as bad as the rest of the decks at the bottom. Yeah, it's really degenerate. Go for it. Domain Zoo has been power crapped out of the format by Energy. This absolutely does not keep up anymore, by the way. You know what? Shift and Tell too. This is okay. I'm going to put Shift and Tell back in Fringe. I think if you fired up an all Shift and Tell list, you would have an okay time. You wouldn't have a great time, but you would have an okay time. Definitely much better than, like, trying to play Sam combo or Domain Zoo or Nadu, okay? Like, I don't think those decks belong in the same tier list. I'm moving Shift and Tell up. This deck's powerful, but it's just, like, significantly worse than playing actual Show and Tell, and also worse than Gruul Gift. But if you want to have fun, go off King. I think this is viable in BO3. Sneak and Shift, that's no good build for that. Not a better one than Shift and Tell. Uro, Oko, Sultai, Midrange, pile of cards, you know, mid-range with some blue mage copes sprinkled in. I don't think this deck is good. You know, the meta would have to settle in a very different way in order for a greedy mid-range pile like this to, like, thrive. A slow mid-range, the slow kind of greedy, not the degenerate kind of greedy. There's your difference. The meta would have to settle in a particular way for an Uro deck to rise to the top again. Winota was great before MH3. Power crept out of the format, unfortunately. There's way too much instant speed removal running around for you to think about casting a 4-mana creature. Like, decks have to contain Mardu Energy. Mardu Energy, which is casting a 2-mana Thought-Knot Seer and a 2-mana Flip Planeswalker. Your 4-mana creature has no place in the format, I'm sorry. Same with Yogg. It's just too slow for the format right now. You would think that a creature combo deck like Yawgmoth that can use Yawgmoth to control the board would be very favored against a creature aggro deck like Mardu Energy, but that is wrong. Mardu Energy will kick its teeth in. Boros Energy will also kick its teeth in and smother it in card advantage with the ring. It's not a good time to play Yogg. All right, boys, we're having fun shitposting at the bottom. I'm going to end the video here before I say something a little too silly and tick off all the blue mages in the format all at once. So that's my recap of the meta. I'm super excited for Aether Drift because we're at least getting one card that's really going to shake up the meta. Maybe I'm overselling it. Like, when I first saw the spoiler, I was like, holy shit, the format's cooked. Oh, all right, yeah, so now it's tomorrow and my opinion's a bit more neutral. It's a bit more mellowed out. I realize it's going to knock a bunch of the unfair decks up like half a tier, but it won't break the format probably. I'd love to see Force Negation as a safety valve for those sorts of decks, though. And also to give Control a little bit of a boost, because Control is unfortunately going to go down a bit following the Chrome Mox edition, unless we get a really good Control card, like Force of Will or Force of Negation. All right, that's going to be it for me, boys. I'm running out of voice. Thanks for watching. Join the Discord. Love ya.